What if your business could scale without hiring a single new employee just by using AI? Meet Hunter Jensen, the tech visionary from Barefoot Labs and Barefoot Solutions. With over 20 years in the industry, Hunter has helped everyone from startups to Fortune 500 giants like Microsoft and Samsung use technology to drive measurable growth. Now he's on the mission to make an artificial intelligence practical and private for every business leader who doesn't want to sacrifice control or data security. In this episode of Business Growth Talk, Hunter reveals the personal journey that took him from a freelance coder to a founder of two thriving companies and a game-changing insight he's learning along the way. We dive deep into AI and how it can transform operations and why CEOs need to stop relying on public tools and what it really takes to grow a business that lasts in today's tech-driven world. If you're ready to simplify your digital strategy and scale smarter, this conversation you won't want to miss. Hey Hunter, how are you today?
Hey, Mark, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for being a guest on my show. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. AI is obviously very important for people, and I want to go straight into a question about your story, which was you started as a freelance developer in 1998. What drew you into tech, and did you ever envisage that you would found your own business?
Yeah, my father it was like a blue collar guy, did construction, had a hot dog restaurant, but he was very tech forward. He had one of the like Zach Morris microphones, but the one you had to carry around like in a
Yeah,
case and it weighed
yeah.
like a brick. And so I had my IBM 386 when I was like 8 years old and a 1200 baud modem. So I was in it very early. And I always knew that I wanted to be in technology. And I built my first website for a client when I was like 13 or 14 years old. So this is in my blood. Entrepreneurship is in my blood, and so is technology. I love what I get to do for work every day, being in the tech space.
That's incredible. But did you feel like you said you were entrepreneurial? So did you always see that you would start your own business?
I always, from a very young age, knew that I was going to start my own business. I started picking up PHP gigs on Craigslist when I was in college and knew that I was going to turn that into kind of a full-time thing. Most people, when they graduate from college, they move to where their job is, right? They go to DC or New York or Charlotte to go work for an investment bank. But I knew I was starting my own thing and I could go wherever I want. And so I literally did this. I opened a map of the United States and tried to guess what the best city to live in might be. And I landed on San Diego. And frankly, I think I got it right.
Amazing. So what led you from running an agency to launching a product focused company like Barefoot Labs?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. We've been doing custom software development forever. We started doing WordPress websites. Mobile came along and we got in really early. We had one of the first 100 apps in the App Store as soon as it was open to the public. And so that fueled our growth for quite a while. And then we got into the Internet of Things and medical device apps and things like that. And then we got into blockchain and crypto back when it was pretty hot. And then most recently, we got into data science. We did our first machine learning projects like 10 years ago, right? AI has been around for a very long time, like since
Yeah,
the 70s and the 80s, right?
yeah,
What's new is generative AI, right?
yeah,
Really, that came onto the scene in November of 2022 when ChatGPT opened to the public. That
yeah,
story actually started 5 years earlier in 2017 when a Google researcher published their paper, which basically discovered transformer models. It was called Attention is All You Need. And that kind of started the space race, if you will. And fast forward a year or two, and the writing is on the wall here. My business model, as it stands, is very much threatened by AI, right? I'm in the business of selling engineering time, selling development hours. All of a sudden, what used to take 100 hours might take two. And you might not even need an engineer to do it. So with this kind of gray cloud like looming over just like some real uncertainty about what it means to own a software development company, And it was really foggy for a while. And I had a buddy come to me. He's a patent attorney. And he said, man, I sure wish I could use ChatGPT in my job, but I can't. I'm looking at very confidential chip designs and writing patent applications for them. There's no way I can upload any of this stuff into a large language model. And I said, let's unpack that. Let's see what we can do about that. So I stitched together some open source stuff in an open source large language model and installed it literally locally on his laptop and let him try it out for a month. And he came back and he said, man, this thing is already saving me about 6 or 7 hours a week.
Right.
I said, wow, that's a lot. We should bring this to your firm and think about building something that all the attorneys at the firm can use. And so we scoped it and they were on board, and we scoped it out like we normally would as a custom software project. We were going to build this for this company and hand it over, and that was going to be that. And then I read about GSAI, which is Goldman Sachs' internal AI platform. And I'm like, oh, so this is like a large language model plus a RAG database plus some integrations with their other systems. So that's like what I'm building already for this law firm. And then I do a little more research and I see JP Morgan has one of these, Cisco has one of these, BAE Systems has one of these. All the enterprise players are rolling out internal AI platforms to boost employee productivity.
And also reduce hire as well. So this is reduce hiring of the graduates who used to come in and get that grounding. I'm hearing this. I used to work at PwC, and there's definitely this flux of less graduates are needed because AI can do a lot of the research that they would normally do.
That's right. It's coming for the junior positions first, for the kind of entry level positions. It actually creates a very interesting paradox that is yet to really fully play out. But how exactly do I go about finding mid-level and senior engineers when there's no junior engineering anymore? Like how do you know, where do they come from? So that's a paradox for another day. But as I come to this realization that mid-market companies, especially those that deal in confidential information, which is a lot, which is like half of the mid-market companies right now, think financial services, legal, defense, you name it. These mid-market companies are going to need this. They're going to need it soon, and they don't have the resources for it in the way that Goldman Sachs does. So the entrepreneur in me sees this as an opportunity.
Right.
So I go back to the firm and I say, what if I built this for you, but I keep the intellectual property and I'll license it to you for cheaper? And they heard the word cheaper and they said, great, let's do that. And so Compass, our product, was born out of that, right? It's a self-hosted AI platform, large language model, RAG database for file search, connecting to the various data sources and kind of unique processes that every business might have to boost employee productivity, boost output, boost quality, and ultimately help companies grow without increasing their headcount, which is typically how a company would grow. And so we did the math for this law firm. If there's 750 attorneys, if every attorney is saving 6 hours a week and they bill out at $500 an hour, whatever it is, $100 million in net new billables, right? In terms of the efficiency of their time. It's not incremental, it's staggering new creation that generative AI can bring to these mid-market companies. And so while we're not sunsetting the custom software development business at all, Barefoot Solutions, in fact, it's growing. We are also building this product plus a service offering to make it completely custom for your business, because that's what I believe is needed. SaaS is not the answer to this. You need to own it. It needs to be part of the core operating system of your business. And the only way to do that is to actually have control over it and be able to dictate how it works and get your standard operating procedures systemized in there to ensure that employees across the entire organization are following those SOPs. And it's boosting the quality of their work, because at this point, large language models make less mistakes than humans by a big margin. And so by instituting a platform like this, you are going to find less mistakes. And I've got news for you. If you don't provide a tool like this for your team, they are using ChatGPT anyway, and your
Yeah.
data is at risk, right? That is rampant across all companies right now. Knowledge workers need AI tools to keep up. And if you're not giving them to them as a business leader, then they're finding it elsewhere. And they quite possibly like putting client relationship and your data confidentiality at really severe risk.
What's the privacy angle for this? So with the JP Morgans, they want to have an enclosed space for JP Morgan or whoever it is. How do you keep that integrity of the privacy if you're licensing it to multiple companies that you're working with?
Yeah. So the key, and it sounds like a small thing, but it's not, it's actually really important, is that this is self hosted.
Okay.
We are not running a SaaS product. This application in your cloud infrastructure, on your
Okay.
Azure, on your AWS. It's not sharing resources. And that
Yeah.
allows you to customize it, and it keeps everything inside of your like firewall,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay. Makes sense. What advice would you give CEOs, leaders that are feeling overwhelmed by this rapid AI technology landscape, which is changing so fast? What would be your advice to them about overwhelm?
Yeah, I hear this all the time. I know I need to do something, but I have no idea where to start. I get that a lot from CEOs and business leaders. And I understand. Like, I read about 2 hours every morning just so I can come on podcasts and kind of feel like I know what I'm talking about, right? That's how fast the world is changing right now. And so, the single piece of advice I would give to those folks is find your killer use case. What single killer use case would move the needle and would impact your bottom line in a major way? Now, that's just to get started, because it's not about sniping individual use cases, pulling in all sorts of different tools, several for each one. You need to be thinking about this as a platform, as a tool that can handle a lot of use cases, but that's overwhelming. So don't start there. Just find that one use case. As an example, a defense contractor. They spend about 80 to 100 hours responding to RFPs. That's a big part of their business. Getting awarded an RFP with an SBIR is about $3 million for phase 1 and 2 of revenue for the company, right? Now, what if you could double or triple your RFP response output? If you can maintain even close to the same close rate,
Yeah.
that has a direct revenue line, right? You're talking about
Yeah.
doubling or tripling your revenue, and you haven't hired anybody. You didn't
Yeah.
hire someone. You're just massively boosted the productivity of the team that responds to these RFPs.
Yeah.
Oh, and then, so that's your killer use case, right? Oh, and then they say, oh, we could also use this for our monthly reporting and our annual reports. And would this do market research? And then it proliferates, right, through the organization. It gets people thinking. Once they see that one use case and how impactful it can be, that's when you start to get buy-in, because there's always going to be people who are afraid that this is going to take their job. And I'm sorry, but some people, it's going to take their job, or rather, a job that they might have gotten that no longer exists because they're not
Yeah.
hiring for it anymore. So you have to show the value to them. It's not about taking your job, it's about boosting your output and your quality. And once they see it that way, wow, this makes my day a lot easier and I can get them way faster. And you start to see buy in. So that's at the worker level, at the knowledge worker level, at the executive level. It's the same thing. It's always been, and I've been talking about this since I was 21. It's always about ROI. You have to calculate the return on the investment of your killer use case. And then you need to make sure you're tracking that. So once it deploys, are we hitting our KPIs? Are we
Yeah.
getting our ROI? If we're not, something is off and we need to fix it, right? That's how you get the CFOs and the CTOs and the CEOs on board, is making sure that ROI is calculated ahead of time and is tracked closely, and you prove it, you show it in the P&L that we got a massive return on our investment in this AI tool.
Who is your ideal client? Who are the people that you're targeting when it comes to marketing?
Yeah. So broadly, it's mid-market companies that deal in confidential information. Okay, but that's really broad, right? What we're seeing a lot of interest in is really three sectors, and that would be financial services, number one, law, and defense. The reason that these are big is not only are they dealing in very sensitive information, these people are, and they're regulated, right?
Yeah,
And a data breach is a company ender in
yeah,
some cases, right? So they really care about this. And then they need to be a certain size. You'll notice I'm not talking about SMBs right now. And the reason I'm not is that right now the hardware is still expensive to run something like this, right? Even if we had a cheaper price point, and then it would be, oh, but you got to tack on another $2,000 a month to pay for your GPUs, or this thing's going to be slow as molasses. And that's a bit of a bridge too far. And I
right.
find they don't have the technical infrastructure, and their data's a mess and things like that. So they need to have reached a certain level of maturity, call it 15, 20 million in revenue, something like that. And they need to be dealing in confidential information. And typically we find there's two ways in, there's bottom up and top down. Like in the case of the law firm, it was a patent attorney that was like, I just want to use this for my job, and sold it to upper management. And that's the easier path, actually, is to get an internal champion, because they see the value, they understand day to day what it's going to do, how it's going to impact their work. It's a harder pitch to try and sell that to someone who doesn't do that work, like a
Yeah.
CEO, right? They might not use it all that much. It's the knowledge workers that they employ that are really going to get the most benefit. And so I do love finding an internal champion that just says, hey, could your thing help me with blank? And often it's if you're ingesting a lot of content or you're creating a lot of content, whether that be patent applications or contracts or wealth planning or responding to RFPs, like all of that, then this is a good large language models. They're really good at words. That's the whole point of a
Yeah.
language model, right? So reading and writing words is where you're going to see the biggest impact.
Where do you see AI going for businesses specifically? How's the next impact that's going to have in? I've got here the next 5 to 10 years. I feel 10 years is almost too long a point to really go to. Like the next few years, then, how do you see AI developing in the next few years?
Yeah, you go beyond 5 years and you're writing science fiction, but
Yeah,
it like
yeah. It's moving so
it's
fast,
probably
isn't
going
it? It
to happen, but
literally is.
it seems like almost silly right now. So 3 to 5 years, here's my vision for
Yep.
businesses.
Yeah.
Okay, so these enterprises and now mid-market companies are rolling out these tools. Eventually, small businesses will as well. They've got some nice use cases. They're seeing the value. They keep connecting other systems to it. They keep finding new use cases. And they say, oh, could this thing like update my CRM for me? Sure,
Mm.
of course it can. We've got model context protocol, which might be a little technical for users, but MCP is a huge deal. It's basically like when REST APIs became a thing and connected all of the platforms on the internet. MCPs are doing the same thing, but for large language models. And oh, could this thing organize my emails? So when I have 30 minutes to do emails, it'll tell me the most important ones that I need to respond to. Yeah, I can. And so 3 to 5 years, what I envision is that when a knowledge worker wakes up and sits down at their laptop, they go to their AI platform. That's work. They don't log into their CRM. They don't log into their QuickBooks. They don't log in anywhere other than right here, and they can still do all the same things, but it creates this wonderful interface for the rest of your business. It's almost like when ERPs were, they still are very important, but the dream of the ERP was, oh, I can have one place where I can control my whole business. Okay, that's true, but the experience is awful, and I've never met a single person that says our ERP is awesome. Imagine it as like a next generation of that, where this is your control center. This is where you work. I need to see quarterly reports for this. We need to generate our 10K. I need to do emails. And you have this one interface that doesn't replace all your systems. It just makes them easy to work with. That's where I see this going, is everybody has their own place in this AI ecosystem that companies are creating, and that's where they go to do their jobs.
So they're looking at dashboards, they're looking at summaries, they're looking at reporting. All of this is within, you're logging into the AI to see all of this, to then be able to respond to the data, to the reporting, to the email, to so you feel everyone's going to be logging into AI rather than into Salesforce, into email, into whatever, like HubSpot or whatever it is. We're going to be logging into an AI that gives us all the information we need.
That's precisely it. And to go back to what I said at the very beginning, that's why self-hosted is so important. That's why SaaS can't fix this. It might be able to solve a use case or two for you right now, but you're going to get stuck and it's not going to be able to do the things that you need it to do. You need to own it because it is going to be the control center of your entire business within the next three years. And that's, I'm up on my soapbox,
Yeah.
pounding
No.
there, trying to get that word out.
Is AI going to be a bubble economically? Or even aspects of it?
Sure, yes. There will be industries. I'll give you an example. Oil and gas, power. Right now, their charts are so steep, just going up and to the right. Like there will never be enough energy and there will always be endless demand for new energy. Let's build the biggest data centers we can and all of this. But they are ignoring the fact that very smart people are constantly working on making it cheaper, faster, and easier to run AI tools, right? It is not an exponential growth curve forever. And so I do think at some point we're going to look around and think this is a lot of infrastructure that we don't need, and that's going to be costly. Right. So I think that there are bubbles. Yes. Is it a bubble? I do not think so. No. And the reason is that bubbles require that we get ahead of it and we get over our skis, right? It's .com and we invest billions in e-commerce, but the economy did not catch up to us. And so we lost a lot of value and a lot of money during that bubble burst. But that meant we got ahead of it, and it's going so fast that we are not fast enough to get ahead of it entirely, I don't think. And that's the reason why, unlike other technology bubbles, I don't think that this one overall is.
That's interesting because every business owner to an extent is always, any investor, you look at VC funds and things like that, anything with AI, they're suddenly like their ears prick up and they're looking for the next unicorn that they're going to try and find. Is there an element of, you think the technology advancement will always be faster than the people pumping in the money and therefore it can't be a bubble? I'm just interested in exploring this because we didn't, like the .com was a bubble, it burst, but we still had legacy, that the internet still existed, still grew, still technology progressed. I'm fearful that everyone is suddenly feeling that anything with AI at the end of the tool, the service, the product, the process is what people are investing in. And that's what I worry about with if there is an AI bubble, is that people might be investing in bad businesses that might not have a good business model, and that's when the bubble might occur.
Yeah, I get that. I do. But the VCs, they've been burned a few times. They remember .com. And if you're an AI startup right now, it's actually not easy to raise money right now. It's hard.
Okay.
It's very hard. It's some of the hardest I've ever seen. And one of the major reasons is an uncertainty. We don't know where this is going to go. Another reason is that the SaaS playbook doesn't work anymore. It used to be give them $1 million, they go heads down, they build a product for 9 to 12 months, they launch, and they have a competitive advantage. They're the first mover. Yeah. That's dead. First mover advantage doesn't work anymore. And so if you're an investor, you have to find another competitive advantage. One of the most interesting, I think, right now for investors is companies with extremely unique data sets that aren't using AI to leverage them. If you came to me and said, hey, I'm partnered with this company that's been around 70 years, they have a data set that nobody else in the world has, and here's what we think we can do with it, that is a very interesting competitive advantage. And so I think the VCs are pretty savvy right now, and they're being very careful. Like, I call it the weekend problem. I'll give you a quick anecdote here. All right, so you were on my LinkedIn today. You sent me a connection request.
Yeah.
I needed a new LinkedIn photo. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. And what I would have done previously is hire a photographer and spend
Yeah.
$200 and go to their studio and wear my suit
Yeah.
and take pictures. And it's awful. I hate doing it. I said, okay, I'll try some AI tools for this, see what I can do. And I paid $20, and and this was 2 years ago, mind you, when diffusion models and image generation were still pretty wonky. And it gave me 40 options, and I had missing teeth and 3 arms in some of them, but a few of them were pretty darn good. So I picked one, and it's the one on my LinkedIn right now. If you look, I don't own that suit. That is not a photo that I ever took. And so the entrepreneur in me thinks, well, that's a pretty nifty business. And then I think through it a little bit more, and I realize, no, it's not. I could build that in a weekend. And that's what I
Right.
mean by the weekend problem, which is that it's no longer hard to build things. If you build it and it's cool, there are 10 more of them in the next month.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a different angle, a different strategy. These kind of nifty AI tools are a flash in the pan. There's just no competitive advantage with them.
Yeah. I get that. So, with your clients that you're working with, you said the areas that you're specializing in has technical data. How are you balancing between innovation and compliance when you're working with heavily regulated industries?
It's hard. It's hard, especially because we're not regulatory experts. Like, I just bumped into this morning, in fact, where there's some regulations approving credit applications. You have to be able to demonstrate exactly how the decision was made.
Right.
Machine learning is very bad at that, right? And so you're not allowed to use AI to make decisions for credit applications. What you can do is use it to give you a score so that you can incorporate that score into the overall decision making. But a person has to be the one making that decision, and they have to say what impacted their decision. So there's things like that everywhere. And compliance is often the area of the biggest pushback. All the reasons why we shouldn't or can't do this. And so you do have to get into that and say, this company is doing it this way, and this is the precedent here. This is the stance that they're taking, which has not been challenged yet, or what have you. But we're innovating here. And so it is harder that we're dealing with these heavily regulated companies, but these are the ones that need it the most. And so we're doing it anyway, basically.
So, are you asking your AI to help you with the regulatory challenges that you're facing when you're innovating and you're making something new for a company in those industries? Are you now then asking the AI tool to overcome the regulatory issues or concerns that they might have?
100%. Yes. Often. What we do when we start having the regulatory conversation is we say, okay, let's start with what body of regulations govern this company. And it may be the SEC or FINRA, or it may be the Bar Association, or it may be state and federal. There's every company, they know the regs that impact them. And then we feed those in. We feed those in and treat it just like any other project that you might use this platform for. And we ask questions, a lot of questions about it. What do you think about this? What would be the impact of us doing that? Would this be in violation of particular regulations? Show me the language. It's like having a conversation with your regulatory person, right? They know a lot about it. And so, me as a non expert, I can sound like I at least know what I'm talking about when I go into these meetings, because I just had an hour-long meeting with my language model to help me understand what regs matter here, what
Yeah.
are going to be their concerns.
How do you think the different approaches for, we touched on this earlier, I just want to go back to it, the Microsofts, the big Fortune 500 companies versus the startups that are wanting to use AI? How are you working with them, and how is the approach different for a smaller startup versus a mature established business when using AI?
Yeah, very differently. These established businesses have mountains of technical debt, so much so that you can't just replace these things. It's too costly. And so you have to bolt on, integrate, go where the people are doing their work at enterprise. It's the only way to do it. There's going to be legacy software around for a very long time. Now, if you are a startup, you are building AI first. What does that mean? That means that all your code is being generated, not written by a person. It means that your, like, the way you engineer things is just different when you can engineer it as AI first
Mm.
versus trying to bolt it onto an existing product. Just as a very basic example, traditional programming, if this, then that, else this, then that, right? Basic logic.
Yeah.
A lot of that for a startup, it's not the best way to do it anymore. Now it is, what is the probability of that? What would be the best course of action based on these inputs? And I don't have to define the decision tree or the algorithm necessarily. We can use models for that now. So it's a
Yeah.
completely different mindset when you're building software and writing code, when you're building it from scratch with AI versus trying to implement it into large legacy systems. It's like night and day.
And for you, the startups should be building, as you say, from an AI first perspective, that whether they're a tech company or whatever type of company, they should be integrating AI as part of the course of service. So for example, I don't know, a service based industry, they're producing a service to their clients, they're using AI as a way of rationalizing the service that they're actually providing. They are those sorts of companies going to be impacted as much as things like professional services or accountants or lawyers that you're targeting for your clients?
Yeah, companies, like I own a services company, right? Barefoot Solutions is a custom software development service. And they are impacted less, I would say. Sales and marketing is absolutely impacted across any business. Doesn't matter if you're selling a product or a service. It's
Yeah.
majorly impacted. For us, ops is heavily impacted, but that's because we happen to be a software development company. If we were a plumbing company,
Yeah.
it would not, right? So ops, it depends on, I like to say, they came for the programmers first because they're all engineers building these tools. So the thing was like, let's build something to write code, right? And so we're getting hit first, basically.
Mm.
I was talking to a father whose son was graduating from college the other day and was like, man, the future is like so uncertain. What is safe? And I was like, plumbing?
I
you know,
I read an article. Do you know what? I read an article that electricians and plumbers are going to be such a sought after service that actually that's going to be one of the safest jobs to be in.
so like the digital space is being massively disrupted already, right?
Yeah.
First came text, then came images, now it's coming video. That's all inevitable, unstoppable, right? What is way behind are robots. Like real world work, we're not that close.
Yeah. Okay.
Like just picking up a Rubik's Cube and manipulating it is actually an incredibly complex task for a robot still.
Mm,
And
mm,
dealing with the environment around you, because you can't control everything about the environment, which is why Tesla self-driving has so many problems. And,
yeah.
even factory robots have all these issues, is because there's no straight lines in nature. It's organic, and
Mm,
robots need ones and zeros, but the real world isn't ones and zeros. And so bridging that gap is going to take a long time. And people that are working with their hands and doing physical work actually are going to be safe way longer than people that sit at a keyboard. If you sit at a keyboard,
yeah.
you should be concerned, and you need to be thinking about this, and you need to be upskilling. You need to be great at using these tools, or you're going to get smoked.
Yeah. Let's talk about how you've grown your business. So you built it from a solo operation to a full service agency that brands are using, which companies are using. What was that pivotal moment for you from going from a solo operator to a fully fledged agency?
Yeah. There's been a few really profound moments. As a solopreneur for a while, I was hiring contractors here and there to do jobs that I wasn't good at or I didn't have time for or what have you. But hiring the first full-time employee was a major milestone. You're taking a big financial risk, and you're guaranteeing someone's salary regardless of their output for a certain period of time. But if you get the right person, you can have tremendous gains. And that person for me is now a partner and my chief operating officer. And he's been with me since he was the first employee, and he's been with us ever since. And he's incredible. Another moment was in 2019. This one's really relevant for the small business owners and entrepreneurs that are listening. I got to a point where growth plateaued, and I was making nice money, and I didn't have to work that hard, but my revenue was not going up. And I did a lot of kind of soul searching, and I realized that the reason it wasn't going up anymore, it had been going up for years. And the reason it wasn't going up anymore is that I had reached my level of risk tolerance. The amount of capital necessary to get to that next stage of business was too scary for me. And the reason was because I was a solo business owner. The company money and my personal money, those are the same thing. And I wasn't like willing to risk losing my personal wealth because it needed $500,000 of investment in building up more sales and marketing and business development, all this stuff. And that was too scary for me. And so when I realized it was a major inflection point, and what I ended up doing was selling 51% of the business. And so now, and this was to a very large global software consultancy with 1,500 engineers. Now, the company money, and I took the money from the sale and I put it under the mattress, and I bought a house, and I put it in mutual funds, and I did all the things you're supposed to do, right? I diversified, and it was not in the business anymore. And now there's business money and there's my money. And all of a sudden, my risk profile was drastically different. And I was able to risk that $500,000 of company money because I knew I wasn't going to lose my house if it failed, right?
Yeah.
And so I got over this major hurdle by basically bringing in investment and separating the personal from the business. And that enabled me to grow and keep it going into that next level.
Why
So
did
that
you
was a
sell
major one.
50? Why did you sell 51%, not 49% to keep control of the company?
That's what the buyer wanted.
Okay.
Um, and at 51%, it's still you. It's still all you. You are ultimately responsible for this. And it was a bit of a weight off of my shoulders. That's not to say I was going out looking for people to buy 51%. It just so happened that
Right.
this company rather, that's what they wanted. They wanted control. And that was fine with me. And it was one of the best decisions we ever made. I have the most amazing board of directors. They are so supportive. And not many people that go through a transaction like this can say that, but they've been incredible. And we've grown. We've grown big time because we have basically limitless engineering resources in terms of the size of that operation. We have capital to take risks, right? If I had wanted to build Compass and I was on my own, I would have to go get VC money. And right now, I wouldn't have wanted to do that. But because I have a parent company, they were able to fund this effort. I didn't have to
Right.
bring on outside investors. That's huge, especially right now. And then the third is when I promoted my first employee to be chief operating officer and gave him equity in the company. That changed everything for the business and for me personally. I was out of ops. I don't work on individual projects. What do? I hunt whales. I bring in the big deals and I can focus entirely on that and not worry about a bug report or whatever, right? I focus on business development because the owner of the company is always going to be the best salesperson at that company. That's never going to change. You know it inside and out. You've been doing it the longest. You love it. You're proud of it. And it doesn't even feel like selling. You're just helping people. And like, I believe that. I don't think of it as selling. I think it is solving problems for people. It happens that I have a company that can help implement those solutions. But when I was able to focus entirely on that, was another major growth inflection point. So those are three that came to mind.
Thank you. I appreciate your honesty and your openness. So let's talk about sales. You mentioned about that BD is your primary avenue of work at the moment. So how are you implementing marketing and sales strategies for your business?
Yeah. So 4 years ago, there was very much a playbook here, which was hire a fractional VP of sales, hire a salesperson, hire BDR, hire another salesperson, send outbound emails, cold emails, make calls, social media messaging, cold outbound. That worked well for a while. Then it stopped. It doesn't work right now. It's working for some people, but they're wizards. It's very hard as a smaller business to do well in cold outbound right now. So what am I doing? We're doing basically, it's the thought leadership playbook. Still works. Hosting CEO roundtables, writing longer form newsletter content, going on podcasts, doing speaking events. Speaking events in person are probably the number one best lead generator I've ever seen. I went on a tour last year and there was not a single event where I didn't at least get one really solid lead. So if you can get in to speak, I think that works really well. There are a lot of CEO groups out there. There's the Visages and the Sages of the world, but they're also just like one-off groups. I have found them to be tremendous speaking opportunities. Go into a room with 15 CEOs, speak for 30 minutes, answer questions for 30 minutes, and then inevitably a handful of them come up to you afterwards and say, "Hey, can we talk? I'm interested in what you're offering." So that stuff is working very well. And it scales in that if I can run the circuit and bring in the leads, as long as we have some infrastructure in the background to like see those deals through and get them closed, and it doesn't require me to do the whole thing, then you can build a team around that. People say like, you don't want it to rely so much on your own kind of personal brand. And while true, it's what's working right now when the things that used to work are just not really working very well.
How do you think you've evolved as a leader?
One of the hardest things for me to overcome was delegation. When you start off as a solo provider, you do everything, right? You take out the trash and you do your sales and you write your code and you get your clients and you do all of it. And letting go of that was really challenging for me. And it was majorly hampering the growth of our business because I was having a hard time letting go. I was worried about quality and it impacting how people viewed me personally. Because again, it's a similar theme when your brand and your identity, like your personal identity, are completely intertwined, it creates all these problems. I don't want to delegate because I think people might think less of me as a person because of a potential quality issue, right?
Mm.
So now I love delegating. If I like, the very first thought I have when something shows up in my inbox is, who can I get to do this that isn't me?
Right.
That is it's like a master scaling technique, is just delegate everything you can so that you're only doing the things that it has to be you. So I think as a leader that I've really grown in that area. And as the company gets bigger, it becomes less about me as a person and more about the identity of the business itself and the wonderful people that work with us.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'd say that's been one of my biggest areas of personal like leadership growth, is really figuring out how to let go a little bit.
Yeah. And I suppose starting as a solopreneur, it's crystallized even more for you because you were running everything and being able to let go. And I know delegation for me is not the easiest thing, but I've learned that in some cases, some people are better at certain tasks than I am. And that's the bits that you should be delegating because they enjoy it as well. It's what really fuels them. And it doesn't really
Mm-hmm.
fuel me.
Yep.
It's actually a drain. Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate that. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
This is going to sound trivial, but it was absolutely game changing for me. When I started the company, there was a pretty standard billing model, half upfront, half on delivery. What that really meant was half upfront and then half on when the client thinks that it's done and ready. And we were working on the biggest client we had ever worked on and counting on that final payment. And it got hung up for 6 months on just all sorts of silly things. And we almost ran out of money. Cash flow. It's super, super important, managing cash flow, right? And so I looked at that and I said, wow, that almost ended us. How can we fix that? And we changed our billing model. And now it's half up front, 40% on delivery, and 10% on acceptance. And that changed everything. We had so much more cash in the bank when we changed the way that we were billing. Now we don't even do that anymore because we do time and materials and like monthly teams and things like that. But for project-based work, there's that little tweak in the billing structure meant we had another 100 grand in capital to deploy at any given point in time that we otherwise wouldn't have had when we were like very small. So a good decision, I think.
Yeah, amazing. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
The best piece of advice that I've ever been given. Yeah, my brother is a serial entrepreneur and very successful one. And he was the one that told me I needed to make my first hire. I was kind of cruising, I was in my 20s, living in San Diego, having a nice time, making decent money. And he was the one that, you know what he said? He said, you can only make but so much money when you're billing out your own time. Mm-hmm. And that was like a light bulb for me. Wow. I like did math, was like, wow. So even if I'm fully booked and I write code 2,000 hours a year, this is the maximum amount of money I can make. That's not enough. I want more. And so that's when I decided to get real about starting a business and not just like a glorified freelancing operation.
Yeah, amazing.
That was good advice.
Who's helped you most in your career?
Man, I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast. I'll never hear the end of it, but it's my brother. He's 4 years older and made all the mistakes and made sure that I learned from his mistakes. And so I can make new ones, but not the ones that he made. But he's been tremendous. I'm also a member of a CEO group, which I find to be incredibly valuable, and I recommend it to most CEOs. Being a CEO is like being on an island. You can't talk to your employees about your problems. You have your spouse, but they don't really understand. But so being able to talk to other CEOs. Anyway, there's the leader of that group is a guy named Tom, and he's been transformative in how I think about business and how I've been growing my business.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
We fired a client a few years back, and we should have fired them a year before that. And I was so worried about cash flow and the lost revenue that I allowed them to do real damage to my team in terms of the way that they were being treated. That was a failure as a leader. I should have recognized that way earlier. So I regret that, but I learned from it, and I'm not going to let it happen again.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's one of those sort of situations that you won't let happen again. That sort of impact on your team. Yeah.
Yep.
Next question is, was there a time that you wanted to give up, and what pulled you through to continue?
Yes. I can't really talk about it.
Okay.
But it made me want to give up, and it was my wife that pulled me through it and walked with me through a very hard experience that lasted a pretty long time and did a lot of damage to the business. My wife and then my team. I cannot let them down. Just absolutely cannot. And giving up would be letting them down. And so that it became a non-option when I realized that.
Amazing. Thank you for your honesty. Tell me something about you that most people don't know.
Something about me that most people don't know. Like, my persona here is this like tech person, but my happiest place is out on the water with no cell service. I love that more than anything, more than any piece of technology, more than is being on the water and completely disconnected from mainland. That's gotten impossible now with sat phones and all the rest of it. But I took a sailing trip where we lived aboard a sailboat for 10 days in the Virgin Islands, and it was probably some of the best 10 days of my whole life. So I'm like, while I'm very technical and I love technology, I drive a 1995 Tahoe that I love. I can be very analog at times.
That's interesting. There's a paradox in you.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I'm like old school, but also working on the absolute bleeding edge of tech.
Yeah, amazing. What does legacy mean to you? Why?
Very little. It just feels like another way of being narcissistic or egotistical. Legacy to me means I have a 4-year-old son. It means that he can grow up and be whatever he wants and do whatever he wants because we provided a wonderful upbringing for him and took care of him financially and all the rest of it. If that's my legacy and that's it, then I win. Like, that's a win. That's not amazing. A win, that is the win.
Yeah. I get it. My family's incredibly important for me as well. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you or find out more about you?
Yeah. So email me, literally, hunter@barefootsolutions.com. And what I want you to say is that you heard me on this podcast on business growth. And I promise you that I will respond. If you say, no, you have to say that you heard me on this podcast, because I get a lot of weird emails, so I don't respond to those. But if you do, as a thank you for having me on, Mark, I will respond to anyone. You don't have to be a potential client. I love talking about technology, and I'd be happy to talk to you. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. And then we've got barefootlabs.ai, barefootsolutions.com. You can get me at any of those places, but seriously, write me an email and say that you heard me here. I'd be happy to chat with you.
Thank you, Hunter. Thank you so much for your insights, your expertise. It's been a really revealing episode for me, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. This was a pleasure.
Cheers.